The fluorescent lights of Fort Braden's command wing hummed, their cold glow bouncing off the polished floors and the sterile white walls. The building smelled faintly of disinfectant and old coffee, an aroma that had become the backdrop to decades of military discipline and whispered politics. Captain Alina Ward stood at attention near the command desk, her uniform pressed to military perfection, her boots polished so sharply they reflected the harsh lighting. Yet there was dust clinging to her shoulders from the desert training exercise she'd returned from that morning. The smell of sand and sweat lingered on her skin, a faint reminder that she'd just spent 12 hours running drills, rescuing simulated casualties, and pushing herself and her team to the edge. She had barely had time to drink water, her throat parched when the summons arrived. The message had been terse: immediate report to Commander Halston's office. Now. Commander Troy Halston was notorious at Fort Braden, not just for his strict discipline, but for his near-legendary ego. He could turn a simple briefing into a theater of intimidation. And today, he seemed to have arrived early, packing slowly in his office with the kind of deliberate calm that made the hairs on the back of Alina's neck rise. Halston's eyes tracked her every movement, sharp and calculating. He stopped just a foot away, leaning back slightly, the corners of his mouth tugging into a smirk that had ended more careers than any drill sergeant's whistle. "Captain Ward," he began, voice low and cold, "your recent conduct has been problematic." Alina's jaw tightened. "Sir." He circled her like a predator stalking prey. The office was empty. No aides, no witnesses, just him and the weight of his authority pressing down. "You openly disobeyed my directives during the exercise. You made decisions that challenged the chain of command and exposed your team to unnecessary risk." Alina didn't flinch. She had anticipated confrontation. She had lived it her entire career. "Sir, I followed protocol. Your order would have put my team in immediate danger. I refused to compromise their safety." Halston's eyes narrowed. "There's a difference between protocol and insubordination. And Captain," he paused, letting the word hang between them like a blade, "I have the authority to strip you of everything you've earned, starting with your uniform." Alina blinked once, then slowly lifted her chin, her gaze steady. "Sir." He stepped closer, his shadow stretching over her boots, darkening the floor around her like a warning. "Take off the uniform, Captain. You do not deserve it." Time seemed to slow. Alina's nostrils flared, her fingers curling slightly into fists, but fear did not touch her. She had faced worse in the field, worse than petty threats from men who mistook authority for courage. Instead, she tilted her head and allowed a slow, deliberate smirk to rise. A spark of defiance ignited in her chest. "Sir, you just made your biggest mistake." Halston froze for a fraction of a second, long enough for Alina to catch the first flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. That moment of hesitation, though brief, was a crack in his otherwise impenetrable armor. And then the office door clicked open. Alina's muscles tensed instinctively. Footsteps paused behind her. She didn't turn. She already knew someone was there watching, someone she hadn't expected. Corporal Maya Brooks, barely out of her first year at Fort Braden, stepped into the doorway, her expression unreadable. Her uniform was immaculate, but her hands were trembling slightly, gripping a stack of reports she had meant to deliver to Halston. Now she stood frozen, her wide eyes taking in the tense tableau between the commander and the captain. "Corporal," Halston barked, his voice snapping like a whip, "this is a private meeting. Leave immediately." Maya's hand hovered over the door handle, indecision flickering across her features. She looked at Alina, who gave a subtle nod, not one of reassurance but one of strategic permission. "It's okay. You're part of this now." Halston's face was pale, but he masked it quickly with his usual rigid composure. "Do you hear me, Corporal? Out." Maya swallowed, but instead of leaving, she slipped her hand into the inner pocket of her uniform jacket. A faint click echoed. A recording device had just activated. Alina's eyes flicked toward her. She didn't need to say a word. Maya understood. Every word, every movement, every threatening glance Halston had thrown was being recorded. The proof existed in the faint digital heartbeat humming quietly from her pocket. Halston's eyes darted from Alina to Maya, uncertainty cracking his perfect veneer. "How long have you?" His voice faltered. He stopped mid-sentence, realizing too late that every word he had uttered, every intimidation tactic, was now immortalized in digital memory. Alina took a slow, measured step back, letting Halston's growing unease fuel her calm. "I suggest you reconsider your next move, sir," she said, her voice low but unwavering, "because every decision you make right now is being documented." Halston's breathing quickened imperceptibly. He straightened, trying to reclaim his authority, but the seed of doubt had been planted. His eyes flicked toward the door, toward Maya, toward the potential exposure that had never been in his calculation. The tension in the room was suffocating. The hum of the fluorescent lights was suddenly deafening. Alina's mind raced, calculating every potential outcome: a public investigation, an internal leak, the consequences of Halston's arrogance. She had always known this day might come, the day someone in power tried to break her. But she had never been more ready. Halston's voice finally found strength, trembling with forced authority. "Captain Ward, this conversation isn't over. Step aside or face consequences you cannot imagine." Alina's smirk widened, her hands clasping behind her back as if the command he tried to enforce were irrelevant. "Sir, I don't step aside. I stand my ground. And for the record, you've already made a mistake that will follow you far longer than me." Halston's jaw tightened. He glanced at Maya, whose presence was now undeniable, and his carefully constructed world of control began to feel fragile. He knew the recording existed. He knew what he had said, and he knew the consequences would reach ears far beyond these office walls. The door clicked again, this time from the hallway. Footsteps approached, not just one pair but several, moving in sync, rapid and deliberate. Halston's eyes flicked toward the sound, realizing with dawning horror that whatever shadowy advantage he thought he held was slipping through his fingers. Alina's pulse remained steady, though adrenaline coiled through her veins like a live wire. She took one more slow breath and held her gaze on Halston, daring him to act. The footsteps paused outside the office. The doorknob rattled gently, almost mockingly. Halston's face paled further, and the first true crack in his armor appeared: fear. Alina didn't flinch. She had been trained for this. She had survived worse than a temperamental commander, and now, standing in the glow of harsh fluorescent lights, with Maya at the edge of the doorway recording every moment, she knew the battle had just begun, and she held the advantage. The door handle turned, and in that moment, Alina Ward's calm defiance was about to meet the first real test of her entire career. The office door rattled again, sending a shiver of unease through the stale air of Fort Braden's command wing. Halston's eyes darted to the handle as though it might suddenly explode into a threat, his composure cracking just slightly. Alina remained perfectly still, her smirk tempered with an almost imperceptible edge of wariness. She knew instinctively that the door's movement meant one of two things: either reinforcements or an unwelcome audience. Then the door swung open just enough to reveal a figure frozen in the doorway. It was Corporal Maya Brooks, the young soldier who had arrived earlier to deliver reports. Her wide eyes reflected fear and uncertainty, but also a determination that surprised even Alina. Maya's uniform was perfect, her boots polished, her posture taut, but her trembling hands betrayed the storm inside her. "Corporal," Halston barked, his voice sharp and commanding, "this is a private meeting, you're dismissed, out." Maya swallowed hard. She had rehearsed obedience her entire military life. Standing in front of Halston was a risk to her career, but something in her gut told her to stay. She glanced at Alina, who subtly nodded, not the nod of reassurance but the nod of permission. "It's okay. You're part of this now." Halston's smirk faltered. Do you understand me? Leave now. Maya's hand slipped into her jacket pocket, brushing against the small device she had carried with her, hidden and recording. Her heart pounded. This was the moment she decided she would not be a bystander. She flicked a tiny switch. A low, almost imperceptible hum activated. Every word, every pause, every threat Halston had flung at Alina was now captured in high-fidelity digital memory. Alina's eyes flicked toward her, sharp and approving. Maya had just tilted the balance of power. Halston's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his armor of arrogance appearing. He realized the gravity of the situation. Everything he said, every intimidation tactic he used, was being documented. Every threat, every condescending tone could now be used against him. "You've got some nerve, Corporal," Halston hissed, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "Do you understand the consequences of this?" Maya's voice, though small, was firm. "I understand everything, sir." Alina stepped closer, closing the small distance between her and Halston, her presence calm but unyielding. "Sir, I suggest you reconsider your next move. Every decision you make now is being recorded. Every threat, every attempt to intimidate, it's all documented." Halston's eyes flicked between them. Fear and fury mingled on his face. He tried to reclaim control, to project authority, but the seed of doubt had been planted. The control he relied upon so heavily, the invisible but suffocating power he wielded over Fort Braddon, was no longer absolute. "I don't care if you're recording," he finally said, voice strained. "You're making a mistake, Corporal. Captain Ward, this conversation is over. You will obey my orders." Alina tilted her head slightly, smirk never leaving her lips. "Sir, I've obeyed orders my entire career. I've risked my life for this country, for my team. I don't obey orders that put others in harm's way, and I certainly don't obey threats from someone afraid of being exposed." Halston's jaw tightened, and for the first time, he realized that Alina Ward wasn't just a soldier, she was a force. Not one he could bend with intimidation or authority. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the faint hum of the recording device. Then came the unmistakable sound of hurried footsteps outside the office. Multiple sets of boots pounded the polished floor, echoing through the empty corridors. Halston's eyes widened. "They're coming," Alina said softly, though not as a warning but as a statement of fact. Halston's expression twisted into a mixture of anger and panic. "What is this?" "Evidence, sir," Alina replied, her voice calm, controlled. "And witnesses." Maya pressed the recording device closer to her chest, her grip trembling slightly. "Everything you've said," she whispered to Alina, "all of it's saved. You can stop him now." Halston's fists clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He realized that his careful, calculated power play had failed before it even began. The presence of a witness, one he had never anticipated, had tilted the playing field irreversibly. "You think a little device can ruin me?" Halston spat, though his confidence no longer carried the weight it once had. "I'm the commander here. I make the rules." Alina tilted her head, eyes sharp as a blade. "The rules, sir, are only as valid as the people who enforce them honestly, and right now, everyone watching knows you're lying." Maya's eyes widened as Halston suddenly stormed toward the door, perhaps intending to seize or destroy the device. But Alina's presence was magnetic, almost predatory. She moved swiftly, blocking his path without aggression but with authority that even he could not ignore. "Stay back," she said, voice firm. "One step closer and you'll have to answer for this publicly." Halston froze, just long enough for Alina to see that he understood her perfectly. Fear was evident now, pure, unmasked, and terrifying in its intensity. From the hallway, more footsteps echoed. Someone else was approaching. Not an aide, not a fellow officer, someone higher up. Someone who would witness every misstep Halston had taken in that office. Maya whispered, almost to herself, "He doesn't know who's coming." Alina's smirk widened. No, he doesn't, and that's exactly why we're not leaving. Halston's eyes darted to the door, realizing too late that the tide had turned. The power he had wielded so ruthlessly for years was slipping from his hands. The very fear he had used to command obedience was now mirrored back at him, and he could see it in the quiet determination of Alina and the courage of Maya. Then the door handle turned. Halston's face paled. Every instinct screamed at him, "Don't let anyone see this. Don't let anyone know your weakness." But it was too late. Alina's eyes didn't leave his. She could feel the shift in the room, the invisible scales of power tipping. She wasn't just standing her ground. She was orchestrating his downfall, step by deliberate step. As the door swung fully open, a shadow fell across the doorway. Halston's voice caught in his throat. The room held its collective breath. The first pair of boots entered, not an aide, not someone he controlled, someone with authority beyond his reach, someone who could validate the truth Alina had fought to protect. Halston's smirk faltered, replaced by the twitching uncertainty of a man who realized his empire of control was built on sand. Alina's heart remained calm, controlled, and ready. She had waited years for a moment like this, when truth, courage, and careful preparation intersected in a single instant. And the shadow in the doorway was the key to it all. Alina's pulse raced, but her face betrayed nothing. She took a measured breath, her eyes locked on Halston, and waited. The silence stretched, suffocating, every tick of the clock amplified in the tension-thick air. For the first time in his career, Halston was on the defensive, unsure of what would come next. And that uncertainty, fear, the uncontainable tremor of doubt, was exactly what Alina had been counting on. The footsteps halted. Halston's gaze followed. He had no idea who had arrived. And Alina, she smiled ever so slightly, knowing the witness's identity would turn the next few hours into a reckoning no one at Fort Braddon would ever forget. The office door creaked further, the tension stretching like a taut wire, ready to snap. Alina knew the next word spoken, the next move made, would determine not just her career, but the fate of everyone who had dared to cross her or underestimate her. The shadow stepped fully into view. And Halston's expression, frozen, horrified, unmasked, told her everything she needed to know. The tide had turned. By the time the shadows of Fort Braddon stretched long across the barracks, Captain Alina Ward realized the battle was only just beginning. Commander Halston's fury had metastasized into a calculated vendetta. Within hours, the whispers of the base rumor mill were alive with distorted tailies. Captain Ward defied orders. Captain Ward endangered her team. Captain Ward is finished. The accusations spread like wildfire, and some soldiers looked at her with fear, others with disgust, and a few with quiet sympathy. She walked through the dimly lit corridors with a steady, measured stride, each step echoing against the polished concrete. Her boots, still dusty from the morning's training, clacked against the floor like a warning bell. She was not broken. Her locker was sealed. Her access card was revoked. Notifications pinged her now-disabled email. Internal investigations for conduct violations and insubordination had been filed before she even knew she was being accused. Someone had moved fast, and Alina knew exactly who. She paused outside the comms building, the familiar hum of electronics washing over her. There, packing like a coiled spring, was Corporal Maya Brooks. Her face was pale, eyes wide, hair pulled tightly into regulation bun, yet there was a spark of determination burning behind her fear. "Captain, I didn't know it would blow up like this," Maya said quietly. "I just thought." "You lit the fuse," Alina interrupted, her voice calm, almost clinical. "But that doesn't make you the one responsible. This is Halston's doing. He underestimates courage, and that's his fatal mistake." Maya's lips pressed together. "I have the recording, but Captain, someone from Intel already asked me if I saw you today. They're onto me." Alina's jaw tightened. "Then we move faster. If Halston thinks he can bury us, he's forgotten one thing. I don't rely on his oversight. I rely on the truth and evidence." Before Maya could respond, a chilling announcement crackled over the barracks intercom. "Captain Ward, report to the tactical interrogation wing immediately. Failure to comply will be considered insubordination." Alina's chest tightened, but her face betrayed nothing. "They aren't asking me to explain," she muttered. "They're trying to trap me." Maya's eyes widened. "Intel isn't just investigating you. They want the recording too." Alina nodded once. She had anticipated escalation. She had lived through it before. What they hadn't realized was that she thrived under pressure. Fear, manipulation, intimidation. These were tools, not threats, if wielded correctly. The walk to the interrogation wing was deliberately slow, each step measured, calculated. The corridors that once felt safe now seemed hostile, walls closing in with whispers of betrayal. Officers she had trained with stepped aside, some staring, some whispering, others avoiding eye contact. They all knew something was different. Something in the air had changed, and it wasn't just Halston's fury. Entering the interrogation wing, Alina was met with the cold, metallic scent of a room designed for breaking people. The walls were bare. The chairs were hard. The table was cold. Two officers, both in their early 40s, stood with arms crossed, circling her like wolves evaluating a cornered prey. "Captain Ward," one said, voice flat and disinterested, "we have reports that you've violated operational conduct." "What conduct?" Alina asked, voice steady but with an undertone of defiance. The other officer smirked, sliding a tablet across the table. The screen lit up with her record, perfect scores, commendations, mission successes. Then suddenly, red flags marked against her name, fabricated incidents, alleged failures, notes that didn't exist that morning. The system, the bureaucracy, was being weaponized against her. "This isn't real," Alina said softly. "These aren't my actions, these are lies." "That's our problem," the first officer replied. "Your career, Captain Ward, is on hold, and the only narrative that exists right now is not yours." Halston's sudden entrance shattered the tense silence. Hands clasped behind his back, posture casual, he walked into the interrogation room with the air of someone delivering a verdict. He didn't look at Alina, didn't need to. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind countless times, imagining total control. "This will be quick," Halston said smoothly, placing a classified folder on the table. His eyes flicked to the officers, full of silent instruction. Alina's stomach dropped when she saw the bold stamp across the folder. "Court-martial recommended." Halston's smile was almost serene, until he realized Alina's gaze didn't falter. She wasn't afraid. She hadn't flinched. Her calm, precise presence exposed him in a way his commands never could. "This isn't just an investigation," Alina said quietly, almost to herself. "This is a trap, and he thinks I won't see it coming." Halston's jaw tightened. "Captain, you're under investigation. You should cooperate." "Cooperate," Alina echoed, tilting her head. "You mean submit to lies and manipulation, to let the system crush my record for your personal vendetta." Halston's hands twitched. He had misjudged her entirely. The two officers exchanged glances, a flicker of doubt crossing their faces. Alina noticed it immediately. She had seen this look before: hesitation, fear, a crack in loyalty. People who had once followed Halston's every whim now hesitated, caught between truth and obedience. Maya, still standing at the edge of the room, whispered under her breath, "What do we do now?" Alina's gaze softened just slightly. "Now we survive, and we fight smarter." Halston's confidence wavered. He stepped closer, and Alina could feel the heat of his rage, the control he had relied upon for years slipping. He didn't shout, didn't strike. He only glared, lips pressed thin. But she could see it. He knew his empire was crumbling. "You're playing a dangerous game, Captain Ward," he said through gritted teeth. Alina's smirk returned, subtle but deadly. The only danger here, sir, is the truth catching up to you, and it's faster than you think. From somewhere in the shadows, a faint sound, a low click echoed across the room, a device recording every moment, every lie, every fabricated threat. Maya's hand brushed against it, keeping it alive. Halston's eyes flicked instinctively to it. For the first time, the fear in him wasn't hidden. "You underestimate me," Alina said. "That's your mistake." Halston's shoulders tensed. "I will see you destroyed for this, Captain," he growled. Alina took a slow, controlled breath. "We'll see who survives, sir, and who doesn't." At that moment, the base intercom crackled to life with a series of unintelligible commands. Alina's eyes narrowed. Reinforcements, surveillance, or worse, another attempt to trap her before she could expose Halston. The tension in the room was nearly tangible. Every officer froze, every shadow seemed heavier, every breath deliberate. The record of Halston's intimidation was now unassailable, thanks to Maya. And yet, the full danger had not yet revealed itself. Halston's eyes darted to the door. Outside, footsteps echoed, rapid, synchronized, authoritative. Alina's heart rate didn't increase, but her senses sharpened. She had survived worse. She had faced enemy fire, harsh desert storms, and betrayal. And now, in this room, she faced the true test of power. Bureaucracy twisted into weaponry, a commander fueled by ego and fear. The door handle rattled. And Alina knew, without a doubt, that the moment of reckoning was approaching. The shadow in the doorway, unknown yet certain, would change everything. For Halston, for Fort Braddon, and for Alina Ward herself. This wasn't just an interrogation anymore. It was a battlefield, and the first shots had already been fired. The fluorescent lights of Interrogation Room 3 flickered as though the building itself was hesitant to witness what was about to unfold. The walls were sterile, metallic gray, and reflected the harsh intensity of overhead bulbs. A single table, cold and unyielding, sat between Captain Alina Ward and the two intelligence officers who had been waiting for her. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and anxiety, thick enough to taste. Alina sat straight-backed, her hands folded in front of her, her posture flawless despite the storm raging behind her calm eyes. The officers circled slowly, each step deliberate, measured, as though choreographed to unsettle her. Their silence was almost physical, a pressure that weighed on her chest, but Alina refused to flinch. "Captain Ward," the taller officer began, his voice flat and clinical, "we have reports indicating violations of operational conduct during recent exercises. We require a full explanation." Alina's lips pressed into a thin line. "Sir, those reports are fabricated. My record is clean. Every action I took was within protocol. Any suggestion otherwise is either misinformed or malicious." The second officer, younger but no less intimidating, slid a tablet across the table toward her. It lit up with Alina's name at the top, her commendations and awards displayed prominently. But the lower half of the screen was smeared with glaring red flags: alleged insubordination, mission errors, failure to report commands. None of it was real. All of it had been planted. "This isn't real," Alina said, her voice steady but cold. "This is a lie meant to intimidate me." "That's what we're here to determine," the first officer said, leaning back slightly, arms crossed. "Your career, Captain Ward, hangs in the balance, and the only narrative considered valid is the one constructed by your chain of command." Alina's eyes flicked to the doorway. She was acutely aware of the silence outside, of the footsteps that had been absent since the first summons. She knew that someone, some force beyond the officer's control, was listening. The recording device in Corporal Maya Brooks' pocket was active, silently capturing the truth of every interaction. Halston entered without warning, his presence as commanding as ever, or at least he tried to make it so. Hands clasped behind his back, posture rehearsed and rigid, he approached the table with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. His gaze did not meet Alina. His smirk was thin, practiced, the kind designed to convey calm dominance. "This will be quick," he said smoothly, placing a classified folder on the table. His eyes flicked toward the officers. Alina could see the unspoken instructions in that glance. Ensure she cannot fight back. Ensure she folds. Her stomach sank at the bold stamp across the folder. Court-martial recommended. Halston wasn't smiling at her. He was smiling at them, at the officers, the instruments of his will. Alina's expression remained calm, though her heart pounded with anticipation. Every fiber of her being screamed that this was the moment when the system, corrupted by arrogance and power, would try to swallow her whole. But she had prepared for this. Every mission she had led, every challenge she had faced, had taught her one immutable truth. Survival relied on clarity, control, and knowing who to trust. Halston's voice broke through the tense air. "Captain Ward, until further notice, you are stripped of all command responsibilities. Your actions have undermined the integrity of this base." Alina's gaze remained locked on him. "Undermined or exposed? You've confused your personal vendetta with justice, sir. There's a difference." Halston's jaw twitched, his composure beginning to crack. "You will see this through, Captain. You have no choice. You are under investigation." "I understand perfectly," Alina replied. Her voice was calm, her defiance measured. "And I trust that the truth will follow me, even through this corruption." Halston's smirk faltered slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his eyes. He had not expected her to remain so composed, so unyielding. The first officer leaned forward, voice quiet, almost conspiratorial. "Captain, it would be wise to cooperate. The evidence against you is compelling." Alina's hands rested on the table, fingers interlacing. "Compelling?" she asked, voice low but unwavering. "You mean fabricated? Every one of these flags is a lie. And I know the moment you accept that truth, you will realize the risk you are taking by siding with falsehood." Halston's face darkened. His confidence had been carefully constructed over decades. He had believed his control absolute, his influence untouchable. But now, standing across from a woman who refused to bend, who refused to yield, he understood the first real crack in his empire. Maya's hand brushed against the recording device in her pocket. Every lie, every fabricated accusation, every intimidation tactic was being preserved. The officers might have believed Halston's narrative, but the proof existed, waiting for the right eyes. "You underestimate the consequences of your actions," Halston said through gritted teeth, stepping closer. "You will regret this." Alina leaned forward slightly, her eyes sharp as a blade. "No, sir. You are the one who will regret underestimating me, and that is not a threat, it is a certainty." The room fell silent. Even Halston paused, uncertain. He was used to control, to obedience, to fear. But Alina's presence, her confidence, disrupted the balance. The officers exchanged subtle glances, their loyalty wavering, caught between the chain of command and the truth that had been staring them in the face. The silence was broken by a faint, almost imperceptible hum from Maya's pocket. Halston's eyes flicked instinctively. He realized too late that his words, his threats, his falsehoods were all being captured. His control had slipped through his fingers. "You're playing a dangerous game, Captain Ward," Halston growled, voice low and furious. Alina's calm remained absolute. "The only danger is ignoring the truth, sir, and the truth has already caught up with you." At that moment the base intercom crackled to life. A low, commanding voice echoed through the walls of the interrogation wing, urgent, authoritative, and unmistakable. The sound of boots outside the door, deliberate and rapid, punctuated the silence. Halston's eyes widened. He had not anticipated this. The officers stiffened. Alina's pulse remained steady. She had survived ambushes, firefights, and betrayals worse than this. She had trained for moments where every detail mattered, where survival depended on precision and composure. This was one such moment. The doorknob rattled, slowly, deliberately. Halston's face paled. He realized that whatever authority he had thought he commanded was now being challenged by forces beyond his control. Alina did not flinch. Every instinct told her that the shadow about to enter the room would tip the scales irreversibly. She had positioned herself perfectly, strong, calm, unbroken. The tension thickened, pressing against the sterile walls. Then the door swung open. A figure stepped through, a presence that was unmistakable, commanding, and dangerous in its own right. Halston's carefully constructed confidence faltered completely. The shadow in the doorway wasn't just another officer. This was someone whose authority could not be disputed, whose judgment could override Halston in an instant. And the realization of this fact hit him like a physical blow. Alina's eyes narrowed. She knew the identity of the person in the doorway. She also knew that from this moment on the game had changed. The rules, Halston's control, the carefully crafted lies, they were no longer relevant. Halston stepped back, uncertainty and fear finally replacing his usual arrogance. Alina's smirk returned, subtle and controlled. This was the first step toward reclaiming everything he had tried to destroy and dismantling the power he had abused. The shadow's presence promised a reckoning. The tide had turned. And in that moment, Alina Ward was ready to strike. By midnight, Fort Braddon had taken on an almost eerie stillness, the kind that made shadows feel alive. Outside the barracks, the desert wind whispered against the metal walls, carrying a cold reminder that danger was never far from Alina Ward's world. Inside her temporary confinement, a small, sterile room meant to house soldiers under review, Alina paced quietly. Every movement was precise, deliberate, like the low hum of a predator calculating its next strike. Her uniform had been removed, her badge confiscated, her rank effectively erased for the moment. The base had tried to strip her of her identity, of the authority that had been earned through decades of blood, sweat, and relentless service. Yet she felt no fear. She had walked through fire before, and the system, no matter how corrupt, was no different from any battlefield she had faced. Beside her, Corporal Maya Brooks shifted nervously, clutching the small device that held the recording of Halston's threats, his orders to have her humiliated, and the deliberate manipulation he had attempted to impose on the officers of Fort Braddon. The weight of the device seemed almost physical, a lifeline holding the truth in her trembling hands. "Captain, what do we do now?" Maya whispered, glancing over her shoulder as though the walls themselves might be listening. Alina stopped packing, letting her gaze settle on Maya. The room was dim, a single bulb casting long, trembling shadows across the walls. "We survive," Alina said quietly, her voice calm but edged with iron. "We survive and we fight smarter, we expose him. We don't run, not now, not ever." Maya swallowed hard. "They threatened me, they'll come for this recording." Alina's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Good, that means they're scared, and when people in power are scared they make mistakes." She crouched slightly, lowering her voice further. "I didn't come this far to let a bully bury the truth. You understand?" Maya nodded, though her hands shook. "I do, but what if they catch me?" "Then we make it seem like it never existed," Alina replied. "That's the beauty of control. You always have to think 2 moves ahead." The first move came sooner than either of them expected. Footsteps, fast, authoritative, echoed down the hall. Alina's eyes sharpened. "They're coming," she said, almost casually, though every muscle in her body tensed. "Not to investigate. They're coming to take the recording." Maya's eyes widened in terror. "What do we do?" Alina stepped forward, placing a steady hand on Maya's shoulder. "We walk out the front door. Calmly, deliberately. We're not running. We're going on offense." The door rattled violently. Someone was trying to force it open. Alina's mind raced. She had trained for scenarios far more dangerous than a base corridor, but now strategy required more than physical skill. It required precise timing and psychological control. "Stick close," Alina instructed. "Follow my lead, every step counts." The door swung open. A shadow of a soldier filled the frame. Halston. His smirk was gone, replaced by raw, unmasked rage. "There you are," he growled. "You think you can defy me?" Alina's gaze met his without hesitation. "I don't think I know." He lunged forward, fists ready, but Alina had anticipated this. She sidestepped him with the fluid precision of someone who had spent years navigating threats far deadlier than a single man's fury. Maya followed, eyes wide, heart hammering. "Stop them!" Halston's voice boomed down the hall. Soldiers began converging, alerted by his rage. Floodlights cut across the barracks, highlighting every movement, every shadow, every potential trap. Alina grabbed Maya's arm, yanking her low and ducking behind a nearby Humvee. Bullets ricocheted off metal, sending sparks and shrapnel into the night air. The desert wind carried the scent of ozone and gunpowder. "South Gate!" Maya shouted, panic rising. "No," Alina countered. "They'll expect that. Follow me through the motor pool." They sprinted, boots pounding the concrete, dodging flashlights and personnel, weaving through rows of parked Humvees and armored vehicles. Alina's mind calculated every angle, every potential ambush, every path to freedom. She had done this before. She had survived worse. Maya tossed her the encrypted military device. "This, if we get separated." "I know," Alina interrupted, catching it midair. "Keep your focus. Don't let fear control you." Suddenly, the sound of boots behind them intensified. Halston's men were not just chasing. They were coordinated, moving in tactical formation. Alina cursed under her breath. They had anticipated her, underestimated her, but she would not give them the victory. The maintenance shed loomed ahead, a narrow escape, barely wide enough for two people running side by side. Alina shoved Maya inside, slamming the door. She could hear the men outside shouting orders, trying to force entry. Then she froze. A shadow appeared in the doorway, not one of Halston's soldiers, not a member of his immediate team. Someone taller, broader, a presence that radiated authority. Halston. He had anticipated the shed, positioned himself there. His expression was a mixture of anger, disbelief, and a flicker of fear, a rare emotion for the commander. "You can't escape me," he growled, blocking the exit. Alina's pulse remained steady. "We're not escaping," she said calmly. "We're exposing you." Halston's jaw twitched. "Exposing me? You're about to be court-martialed, Captain. Your career, your reputation, everything will be destroyed." "You think a uniform defines me?" Alina countered. Her smirk returned, sharper than ever. "You think rules and paperwork can control courage, discipline, and the truth? You're wrong." Halston lunged, and Alina moved like lightning, sidestepping him, letting his momentum carry him into the corner of the shed. Maya screamed, but Alina's focus never wavered. She had trained her body, her mind, and now every instinct guided her. Outside, reinforcements shouted. Flashlights swept the area. The chaos was nearly complete, but in that chaos, Alina saw opportunity. Halston had made a critical error. He underestimated her. He assumed fear would dominate, assumed obedience would override cunning. Alina took a step forward, voice calm but sharp. "Halston, listen closely. Every word you've spoken, every threat you've made, every attempt to destroy me, it's all being recorded, and you can't stop what's coming next." His eyes flickered toward Maya, realizing the device she carried. His anger momentarily gave way to panic. He had assumed control, but the scales had tipped. You don't understand," Halston stammered, voice rising. "I understand perfectly," Alina replied. "I understand how weak people become when they rely on fear instead of integrity, and now everyone else will see it too." A sudden blast of movement outside the shed made Halston spin, trying to anticipate yet another threat. Alina seized the moment, grabbing Maya's hand and moving toward a side exit, unmonitored, overlooked. The desert night swallowed them, the shadows hiding their path, the wind carrying their defiance. Alina's heart raced, but her mind was sharper than ever. She had survived Halston's wrath, survived bureaucracy and corruption, survived intimidation, and now she was ready to turn the tables. Maya whispered, almost breathless, "Captain, what happens now?" Alina's eyes glimmered with determination. "Now we make sure the right people hear the truth. Now we take control." Behind them, Halston's shouting faded slightly, lost in the chaos he had created. But Alina didn't look back. She never had. She only focused on what was ahead: justice, exposure, and survival. For the first time that night, Maya dared to hope. And Alina knew. The moment Halston underestimated her was the moment he sealed his own fate. The desert wind howled across Fort Braden's perimeter, rattling the metal fences and carrying the scent of sand, oil, and fear. Captain Alina Ward pressed herself against the shadowed wall of the motor pool, the faint moonlight glinting off her boots. Beside her, Corporal Maya Brooks clutched the recording device like a lifeline, her eyes darting nervously toward the perimeter fence. The base had erupted into chaos after their narrow escape from Interrogation Room 3. Alarms blaring, boots pounding, shouts echoing in the distance. Alina crouched, voice calm but urgent. "Maya, follow me exactly. One mistake and they'll catch us. Don't look back, focus forward." Maya nodded, swallowing hard. "Captain, are you sure about this?" Alina's eyes scanned the area, the shadows, the vehicles, the guards patrolling in rapid, unpredictable patterns. "I'm sure. We either control the situation or we let Halston control us, and he's already miscalculated once. He won't anticipate this." Halston's voice boomed somewhere in the distance, carried by the intercom system, and shouted commands, warning soldiers to block all exits. Alina's lips tightened into a thin line. He was desperate now, and desperation made men dangerous. She crouched lower, scanning the perimeter. Beyond the fence, a service road wound into the desert, a narrow path where no surveillance cameras had been installed, where the shadow of night could conceal them. "This way," she whispered. Maya followed closely, boots silent against the cold concrete. The chaos inside the base played to their advantage. Soldiers chased phantom threats, lights swung in frantic arcs, radios crackled with confusion. It was enough to mask the movement of two determined soldiers with a single goal: deliver the recording to someone who could act. Alina crouched by the fence, examining the lock. The desert wind whipped her hair across her face, stinging her eyes. With practiced fingers, she produced a small tool from her tactical belt, a thin metal pick designed for emergencies, and worked the lock silently. A faint click echoed in the stillness. "Got it," she murmured. The padlock fell, and the fence swung open with barely a whisper. Maya exhaled, tension leaving her body in a small, shaky gust. We actually made it this far." Alina's gaze didn't waver. "Not far enough, keep moving." They slipped through the opening, sand crunching softly beneath their boots, and melted into the shadows of the desert. The moon was a pale witness, casting long silver streaks across the dunes. Each step was deliberate, calculated, but adrenaline lent them unnatural speed. Halfway down the service road, the unmistakable sound of a vehicle engine rumbled behind them. Alina's head snapped back. A black SUV, headlights off but engine idling, had blocked the road just moments too late. Halston's men were closing in, their determination fueled by fear of exposure. "Split," Alina hissed. "Head for the ravine 2 minutes apart, don't stop." Maya hesitated for a split second, fear pinching her chest. Alina grabbed her hand and yanked her forward. The desert swallowed them, sand whipping against skin, boots leaving sharp tracks in the moonlight. Behind them, the SUV's tires dug into the sand, headlights swinging, illuminating dunes like searchlights in a war zone. They reached a narrow ravine, its jagged edges jagged and treacherous. Alina scaled the rock face first, hand over hand, keeping close to the shadows. Maya followed, her breath ragged, heart racing, but she never faltered. Alina's calm presence gave her courage. At the top, the wind screamed across the plateau, whipping hair into faces, stinging eyes, but also masking the sound of pursuit. They paused, crouched behind a cluster of boulders, catching their breath. Alina's eyes scanned the horizon. Lights flickered far below where the SUV was forced to stop. "They won't follow us here," Alina said, voice low. "The terrain slows vehicles. They'll have to regroup." Maya's hands shook as she held the recording device. We have it all, right? Every word." "Every word," Alina confirmed. "Halston's threats, his manipulations, the lies, everything. It's airtight." But even as relief brushed the edges of their nerves, Alina's mind remained sharp. She knew the fight was far from over. The base could try to track them, the military hierarchy could bury the truth, Halston could retaliate. They needed an authority that couldn't be ignored. Someone with reach, someone with power. "Do you have the contact?" Alina asked. Maya nodded. "Yes, the device is encrypted. I can send it straight to the Inspector General. They'll see everything. They can't ignore it." Alina's eyes softened just slightly, but her pulse remained steady. "Then we make that our next move, but we can't make a mistake. One misstep and Halston wins, and I will not let him win." They moved silently across the plateau, sand swallowing their footprints, moonlight disguising their escape. Behind them, faint shouts carried through the desert, Halston's men searching, angry, frustrated, and increasingly desperate. Suddenly, a glint of light caught Alina's attention. A single figure standing at the ridge above them, silhouetted against the stars. She froze, instinct screaming. Could it be a patrol, Halston himself, or someone else? The figure stepped forward into the moonlight. It wasn't an enemy. It was Lieutenant Colonel James Harrington, an officer with reputation and authority, and one who had previously questioned Halston's methods. Harrington's eyes were sharp, calculating, and focused entirely on Alina and Maya. "You two are far from safe here," Harrington said, voice carrying authority that Halston could not override. "Follow me, quickly. There's a secure location where we can verify your claim and get this evidence to the right people." Alina exchanged a quick glance with Maya. Relief washed over Maya in silent waves, but Alina's mind remained alert. Harrington was their best chance, but they couldn't let guard down. Not now, not ever. They followed him down the winding path through the dunes, the base far behind them now, the desert absorbing the chaos they left in their wake. Every step was measured, every breath controlled. Alina's mind replayed every detail of the past 12 hours, the humiliation, the intimidation, the narrow escape. She had survived because she refused to obey fear. The plateau ended at a small, concealed facility, a communications outpost, long abandoned for routine operations. Harrington led them inside, shutting the door behind them. Alina could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "This is your chance," Harrington said quietly. "Send it, expose him. The truth will follow, and this time it won't be ignored." Maya's hands trembled as she activated the device, sending the encrypted recording directly to the Inspector General's office. Every threat, every manipulation, every lie, uploaded and verifiable. Outside, the wind howled against the walls. Inside, Alina exhaled, a calm determination settling in her chest. The first battle had been survival. The next would be justice. And somewhere back at Fort Braddon, Halston's rage was reaching a fever pitch, his empire of control fracturing under the weight of truth. Alina turned to Maya. "We've survived the first storm. The next one we finish it together." Maya nodded, tears prickling at the edges of her eyes. "Together." Alina smiled faintly, eyes glinting with anticipation. "Then let's make sure he regrets ever underestimating us." The desert outside continued to howl, a silent witness to courage, strategy, and the quiet beginnings of a reckoning that no one at Fort Braddon would ever forget. By the time dawn broke over Fort Braddon, the base was a hive of confusion and chaos. Alarms still echoed faintly across the compound, and officers scurried through corridors, clutching radios, trying to piece together the events of the night. Halston, for the first time in his career, was no longer in control. His carefully constructed authority, the fear, the obedience, the invisible chains of intimidation, had begun to unravel, and he could feel it in the eyes of those around him. Captain Alina Ward, meanwhile, was far from the chaos. Hidden in a secure outpost, she watched the sunrise through reinforced windows, the encrypted recording sent to the Inspector General safely in the hands of those who could act. Corporal Maya Brooks sat beside her, exhaustion and tension etched across her face, but her eyes were alert, scanning every detail as though danger could materialize from the sunlight itself. Alina's phone buzzed softly. A secure message from the Inspector General confirmed receipt of the evidence. Every word Halston had uttered, every threat, every attempt at manipulation. It was all recorded, time-stamped, and verified. The response was immediate: an order to secure Halston for questioning and suspend all command privileges pending investigation. Alina allowed herself a faint smile. The first step had been completed. Halston's power had been temporarily neutralized, but she knew better than to assume victory. Power-hungry men like him didn't surrender easily. They lashed out, sometimes violently, when their control slipped. "They'll come for us," Maya whispered, voice tense. "Halston won't let this go quietly." Alina's gaze hardened. "They will try, but they underestimate what happens when someone refuses to be intimidated." Back at Fort Braddon, Halston was in his office, packing like a caged predator. His hands were clenched, knuckles white. For the first time he felt fear, not the controlled fear he had wielded, but raw, gnawing panic. The whispers of officers, the unusual silence in the corridors, the absence of his authority, all combined to suffocate him. "What the hell is happening?" he barked at a young lieutenant who tried to explain the Inspector General's directive. "This isn't right. She has no proof." "She does, sir," the lieutenant said quietly, voice shaking. "It's encrypted and verified. We can't ignore it." Halston's face contorted with rage. He grabbed the phone, dialing numbers, issuing orders, summoning reinforcements, but his control was slipping. Officers who once followed his every command now hesitated. The fear that had held the base in line was replaced by uncertainty, suspicion, and a growing awareness that the commander they revered was fallible. Meanwhile, Alina and Maya prepared for the next move. The outpost's secure communication system allowed them to monitor base activity remotely. Every movement, every order, every frantic attempt by Halston to regain control was visible on the screens. It was a battlefield of information, and Alina was orchestrating the operation with precision. "The first move is containment," Alina explained, pointing to the schematics of the base displayed on the monitor. "He's panicking, directing his soldiers without coordination. If we isolate him, the rest of the base will follow the rules of the Inspector General's order. He can't manipulate what he no longer controls." Maya nodded, understanding the stakes. "And if he tries to escape?" Alina's eyes flicked to the external cameras showing Halston's office hallway. "Then we trap him. He won't leave the base, not now, not without exposure." Hours passed as Alina coordinated with Harrington and trusted personnel within Fort Braddon. Halston's panic intensified with every passing minute. He demanded loyalty from soldiers who now openly questioned his commands. He barked orders into radios, tried to intercept messages, attempted to regain control, but every effort was countered with facts, records, and unwavering authority from above. Inside the secure outpost, Alina reviewed the footage again, watching Halston's desperation unfold like a slow-motion storm. She allowed herself a small measure of satisfaction, not triumph, but clarity. Every threat he had issued against her, every manipulation, had been recorded and verified. The predator had become prey. By midday, Halston's last stronghold within the base, the command office and immediate personnel, was effectively neutralized. Officers began receiving direct orders from the Inspector General. No contact with Halston, cooperation with the investigation, and immediate reporting of any violations. The walls of intimidation he had built crumbled under the weight of documentation and oversight. Halston, sensing the collapse of his empire, attempted a bold move. He summoned a group of loyal soldiers, intending to retake authority by force. But Alina had anticipated this. Harrington and other loyal officers were ready, intercepting Halston before he could execute his plan. The standoff in the main hallway was tense, silent, electric. Halston's voice was sharp, commanding yet shaky. "You will obey me." "No," Harrington said firmly, stepping forward. "Not anymore. You've lost authority. You will answer to the Inspector General." Alina watched from the secure outpost, every heartbeat syncing with the tension on the monitors. Halston's rage escalated, hands trembling, face red with fury. He was surrounded, outnumbered, outmaneuvered. His empire of fear had been dismantled piece by piece. Maya leaned close to Alina, whispering, "He's not going to go quietly. What now?" Alina's gaze never left the screen. "Now we finish it. We don't let him recover. Not a single opportunity to reclaim control. The truth is on our side and the system is listening." Halston, realizing the full extent of his loss, attempted a final, reckless act, grabbing a service weapon from a distracted soldier. The tension was palpable, every second stretching impossibly long. Officers shouted, weapons raised, but no one fired. Every breath, every heartbeat was a countdown to either disaster or justice. Alina's voice crackled through a secure channel, calm but authoritative. "Lieutenant Colonel Harrington, confirm containment. Do not let him leave." "Yes, Captain," Harrington responded. "We have full control. He is isolated." Halston's eyes darted frantically, realizing his options had vanished. He dropped the weapon slowly, defeated, a man stripped of control for the first time in his career. The officers moved in to secure him, their movements precise, confident, and devoid of fear. Alina allowed herself a brief exhale. The first real victory had been achieved. Halston was contained. His influence had been neutralized. The recording, the evidence, and the precise execution of strategy had dismantled a lifetime of intimidation and control. But Alina knew better than to celebrate. The aftermath would be as dangerous as the confrontation itself. Reputation, rumors, loyalty, and power, all of it would take careful navigation. One misstep could undo everything. She turned to Maya, voice steady. "This isn't over. He may be contained, but the storm isn't finished. We have to be ready for what comes next. The Inspector General can only do so much. He can't protect us from every retaliation, every whisper, every subtle attempt to undermine us." Maya's nod was firm now, her fear replaced by determination. "We're ready. We can handle it." Alina's eyes narrowed, a mix of resolve and anticipation. "Then we continue. Every move from here on out must be deliberate, every action calculated. Halston may be broken, but the system is still fragile. We won't let anyone weaponize it against the truth or against us." The desert wind carried the faint echo of Halston's defeated shouts, fading into the distance. Alina looked out across the horizon, the sun casting long, stark shadows across the sand. This battle had been survival, the next was justice. And Alina Ward had never lost a fight yet. The sun had fully risen over Fort Braddon, burning off the last traces of night shadows and leaving the base exposed under the harsh glare of daylight. Captain Alina Ward stood in the secure operations room, arms crossed, eyes sharp, every detail of the previous night replaying in her mind. The chaos of Halston's downfall had transformed the base into a tense, watchful organism. Officers moved cautiously, whispers floated through the corridors, and the weight of truth now hung heavier than fear. Beside her, Corporal Maya Brooks adjusted the small device that had changed everything. Her hands were steady now, a far cry from the tremors of panic that had gripped her only hours before. "Captain, it's really happening," Maya murmured. "They're taking him in. Halston, for real." Alina allowed herself a small nod. "Yes, Maya, but don't forget, this isn't just about him. It's about every person on this base who has been silenced, intimidated, or afraid to speak the truth. This is for them too." Outside the operations room, the main corridor buzzed with tension. Uniformed officers, some still loyal to Halston, some cautiously neutral, moved under the watchful eyes of Lieutenant Colonel James Harrington. He had coordinated the containment of Halston, ensuring no escalation could occur. His presence was steady, commanding, and precise. The doors to Halston's office opened, and the former commander was escorted through the hallway, hands cuffed, head bowed, not in shame but in disbelief. The fear that had once emanated from him like a tangible force was gone, replaced by frustration and confusion. He realized, perhaps too late, that the rules he had exploited, the authority he had wielded as a weapon, were now his undoing. Alina's eyes locked on him as he passed. Halston met her gaze briefly, a flicker of something, defiance, rage, fear, passing through his expression. But Alina didn't flinch. She didn't need to. The truth and the proof of it had already spoken louder than any threat he could muster. The officers leading him out whispered instructions, the movement precise, ensuring no opportunity for retaliation. Every step was a calculated measure, ensuring the man who had once ruled through fear could not manipulate the system one final time. Once Halston was secured, Harrington turned to Alina. "The Inspector General will conduct the formal proceedings. Your evidence is irrefutable. He won't walk free." Alina's jaw tightened. "That's not enough. I want to make sure the base knows what he's done. That fear doesn't control anyone here again." Harrington nodded. "Agreed, we'll hold a briefing. The truth will be made public within the chain of command. Your actions and the evidence will be the example." Alina exhaled, a slow release, tension leaving her body in waves. She had survived Halston's vendetta, escaped physical danger, navigated bureaucratic manipulation, and now stood on the edge of final justice. But the work wasn't done. The briefing room was filled with officers, their faces tense but attentive. Alina stepped forward, her presence commanding the room without the need for intimidation. She laid out the evidence, every recording, every manipulation, every false report Halston had attempted to fabricate. The officers watched in disbelief, some with shame, others with relief, as the narrative of intimidation and abuse unfolded. Halston's attempts to dominate, to silence, to manipulate, they were laid bare. And now there was no room for denial. "You need to understand," Alina said, her voice firm but calm, "that fear is not authority. Threats are not leadership. The truth is stronger than intimidation. Every order given under coercion, every manipulation, every act meant to silence someone, it ends now. No one here should ever feel powerless again." Murmurs filled the room, officers exchanging glances, absorbing the weight of her words. The power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. Fear no longer governed the base, truth did. Halston remained outside the room, isolated, escorted by security, his anger simmering but impotent. He had miscalculated, underestimated the determination of a single officer who refused to bend under pressure. Alina had anticipated every move, every potential threat, and countered it with precision, courage, and unyielding resolve. Maya stepped forward, briefly taking Alina's hand. "We did it, Captain," she whispered. Alina's eyes softened slightly but remained sharp. "We survived, but now we ensure it's never repeated. That's our responsibility." The Inspector General arrived shortly after, reviewing the recordings, the reports, and the testimonies. Within hours, Halston's suspension became formalized, and the court-martial process was set in motion. No one could reverse the evidence. No one could manipulate the narrative. The truth had prevailed. Even as formal orders were issued, Alina remained vigilant. She knew the remnants of Halston's influence could linger. Whispers, subtle attempts at intimidation and covert challenges to authority were always possible, but she was prepared. She had survived fear, deceit, and direct threats. She was not about to be undone by whispers. Later, as the sun dipped low over Fort Braden, casting long shadows across the base, Alina and Maya stood on the observation deck, looking out over the sprawling compound. The chaos of the day had settled into a tense, watchful calm. Officers moved with purpose, their eyes now carrying respect rather than fear. Maya exhaled, the tension of the past 24 hours finally leaving her shoulders. "It's over, isn't it?" Alina turned to her, a faint smile on her face. "For now, but vigilance is eternal. Power is always tempting and fear is always a weapon. We can't let anyone forget that." Maya nodded. "You think anyone will ever try to come after you again?" Alina chuckled softly, low and restrained. "They might, but I've learned something crucial. Courage is stronger than fear, and evidence is stronger than intimidation. Anyone who underestimates that doesn't survive for long." The wind carried the scent of the desert across the observation deck, sharp, clean, and full of promise. The base, once a place of whispered threats and suppressed voices, had been transformed. Halston's empire of fear was broken. Alina's steadfast resolve had not only survived the storm but had ensured that justice would follow. As the sun set, Alina's mind turned forward. She knew the investigation would continue, that Halston's influence might linger in subtle ways, but she was ready. Fort Braden and the truth were no longer at the mercy of one man's ego. The recording, the evidence, the courage of a soldier unwilling to bend, these were the weapons that had won the day. And Alina Ward, standing tall against intimidation, had proven that integrity, determination, and fearlessness could dismantle even the most powerful of threats. The wind whispered across the desert once more, carrying with it the faint echoes of a hard-won victory and the promise of a new era at Fort Braden. Alina and Maya stood side by side, silent but united, watching the horizon. The battle had been won. The war for justice, integrity, and respect had only just begun, but for the first time it was a fight they were certain they could win. And somewhere deep in the shadows, Halston realized that the woman he had underestimated wasn't just surviving, she was unstoppable.